I was born in Eugene in 1930, and he was a blacksmith on the weekends, and he was a lineman during the week. And my mother, from way back, and mother and father and two older brothers, they were leaving home at the time I was born in 1930. See, he was born in 11, and he was born in 13, and shortly after that, he was pouring melted Babbitt into a form at the livery station on East 5th, and it was for the first gear for a railroad first train coming into Eugene in 1913. And the melted Babbitt, when it hit something cold, it explodes. And whether they didn't have the form hot enough or what, well, it exploded into his face, and then it hit his face, and that was colder, and it blew up his hat, and they said it was sticking on the top of the livery station. But how he survived that, but he was put blind from that. And that was right there, and they raised those two kids, and then two more of us were born. I was said to run the farm there on 13th Street. We had the cow and milk and chickens and eggs, and then we had rentals, and he supported us and raised us with no Social Security, no freebie stuff, no nothing. The center front, her mother and father, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the family, and they went on to have 10 or 11. She was born up in Canada. And my father was born in Bakersfield, California. It was Michael Rogers, M-I-K-E-L, which we went on to name Brian Michael, and my son Mickey, he's Stephen Michael. Eva Jenkins, who married William Ford, who was the grandfather who lived up here. There's Ken's mother and father, and that's her mother and father, which was the Watkins, Waldo Watkins, and then I never knew the mother was dead by the time Ken and I got married in 1948. Field that's like the size of a football field, and old Grandpa Ford used to race the Indians down there, and you'd win the horse, you know, if you win. They built that barn. Grandma Eva Ford, little short, I guess she was just barely 5 feet tall. Him and her built that big barn over there, and you see these great big bulls up there that they used one horse or something and pulled these up. They're giant logs and built that barn. A man and a woman. It's just unbelievable. Here, the Oregon Trail, they tell that there's coyote hanging over a branch. The Indians had thrown it up there, so they named it Coyote Creek. The Palestine Church was down there, and in what year I don't know. They pulled it up here with horses and put it on this 1 acre of ground that Grandpa Ford gave the school, and put this shed, it was a church, Palestine Church, on it, and it was 24 by 32, I should know, because I did all the building on this, and put it there, and made a school, and he gave this to the school, the acre. Ken's dad went to school here. Stephen Harold Ford went to school here from 1st to the 8th grade. Then Ken went to school here from 1st to, I think, 3rd or 4th grade when it consolidated and went to Hadleyville. But anyway, they consolidated. So they sold it to a private party then. And these people, name of Brown or whatever, came in and divided this one-room schoolhouse into 4 rooms, equal, or 12 by 15. This kitchen here is 12 by 15, and the front room was, and so forth. And Mrs. Crail, Grandma Crail up here, K-R-A-A-L, great-grandma way back, she was a school teacher here that taught school here. So that's the history on it. So here Ken and I come along umpteen years later, and this, we were renting in town. We were married, you know, in 48, and this came up for sale for $800. The acre of land and the shack, I mean, it was just a square shack. It had back house down in the corner and the pitcher pump right out here at the back door for $800. Well, Ken and I were both working. We just lost our first baby, so it was ideal that we could move out here and batch, you know, and rough it. We had a potbelly stove and a bed in the front room and a cook stove here, and you could see the stars through the ceiling, and varmints ran around in here at nighttime. And of course, I was a city girl, and it just scared me half to death. Ken would leave for work way early, and I'd leave, and there'd be bear prints out here at the back door. The door just leaned up there with a leather thong on it. Didn't even have a doorknob. And we batched in this, well, this 1-2 rooms here. And then as years went by, we sealed it up and added more bedrooms, more front rooms, and so forth. But that's how this originated here. So we bought it from Grandpa Ford. We paid him cash, you know. We'd get paid every week, and we'd keep paying him cash until we paid for it, the $800 for an acre of land and a house. Which that was, people were making about $800 a year then. 1,000, you know, was good wages for a year's wages in 48, 49. So that was a lot of money, really. Doesn't sound like it to us now. But we raised it up and had a foundation put under it and thought, well, we'll just seal it up so it'll be livable. Ken wired it, and then we started put a roof on it, and one thing led to another. We had so much money in it we couldn't afford to stop. So here we are yet. And that's about the story on this house. Palestine School on Doan Road off Crow Road had its beginning in the home of John Crail, who was a teacher. It was a non-conscription school. Previous to that, it was part of Central School. The year was 1899. It was Wayne Jenkins' first school year. Palestine Baptist Church down at the bridge had been closed its doors, so it was moved up to on Doan Road for a schoolhouse. School there was continued until 1937 or 1938, when the children were transported to Hadleyville School. Then I put in 1950, Stephen Kendrick Ford purchased it from a private person. The school later consolidated with Applegate, then later it consolidated with Applegate School at Crow. The teachers, whose name was Sheets, was tall and skinny with large bony hands. Sometimes he trimmed his toenails between classes. Recess and noontime were spent playing deer and hounds. The teacher was the deer and the pupils were the hounds. The teacher boarded around. Yeah, they boarded the teachers here. The teachers came and lived, you know, with families when they taught school. Boarded around and had a good appetite. At grandfather's, it was reported that he reached for biscuits 3 at a time. The Jenkins children also attended the old Central School on the ranch. The windows were low and the hound dog slept on the sunny side of the room and liked to be petted. John, one of the Jenkins boys, liked to reach out from his seat and twist and pinch the hound's ears. The teacher never knew what made the dog howl so much during school. Later, the abandoned Palestine Baptist Church was moved up to beside Grandfather Jenkins' home, and it became a schoolhouse, and the Jenkins children continued their schooling in the old schoolhouse, which was this. Grandfather Jenkins lived over 35 years on the old donation land claim. When he was married, he could neither read nor write and signed his name with an X, but Sarah, his wife, taught him to read and write. In addition to farming, Grandfather served as pastor in the Palestine Baptist Church for 20 years. Because of his appreciation of education and the need of schools and so forth, he became a leader of the community affairs. The tradition has came down to the present generation. Stephen Ford, great-grandson of Stephen Jenkins today and present owner of the Jenkins original land claim, is the 4th generation of the Jenkins name to carry on, whose Stephen Ford is now deceased. And Stephen Kendrick Ford, his son, was my husband until he passed away here in 01. I did the carpentry going through here, and I'd tell them there was petrified wood in the wall, and everybody laughed at me. But when we cut into this wall, it was, and there'd be boards that are 12, 10 feet long with no knots in them. You can't buy something like that now. Just, you know, beautiful timber and square nails, and they had petrified. They're hard. You start to cut into it, and you think you're cutting into a nail. $640 acres. See, they each got 320 acres in a donation land claim the government gave them, located approximately 12 miles west of Eugene on Coyote Creek, where they lived for a period of over 35 years. In 1885, they moved to Eugene. William Lee Ford was born in Kentucky, who was William was Stephen Harold Ford's father, was born in Kentucky, and then records indicate that he was a pioneer who came out here with a wagon train. He didn't have any money. He was listed as a laborer in some of the biographies that we have. He looked over the Willamette Valley and chose this particular place for his home site. This is Stephen Harold Ford talking. My great-grandfather married, and he and his wife took up the donation land claim of 640 acres. We now have approximately 600 acres, most of which is original donation land claim. The other part has been acquired down through the years. My grandmother, my mother, my brother, and myself were all born right here in the same area. Not all the same building, of course. Grandmother married into another pioneer family, the Stevens family. Their donation land claim was in Notai Valley, which is just up the road to the left from here and about 10 to 12 miles. The Stevens family was quite a large family. There were 6 sons and 3 daughters. There was an epidemic of typhoid during which the 3 brothers and one of the girls died, which they might be buried up here because it'd be a whole family. You'll see the stones. It'd be a whole family. My grandfather was one of those 3 brothers, and he died before my mother was born. So anyway, my mother was an orphan. She was just a young girl when her grandparents passed away, about 12 or 13 years old. She came back out here and lived with her uncle and his family until she married my father, William Lee Ford. He came out here as a boy at 17 from Kentucky and worked around here until he enlisted in the Spanish-American War. I think he was 19 then. My father was a man of a lot of ability. I remember the story about one of the things he did just before my birth. He'd get on a saddle horse and start down from here to Florence, all the way down the Sayusla River, and they'd buy cattle. When they got a herd bought up, then they'd bring them out, and he claimed that he was down there, and something told him that he had to come home. So he left his partner, came home, and I was born that night. It was March 23rd, 1903. I wasn't born in the hospital. A midwife delivered me. He says, I doubt if my birth certificate is even on record. I have one brother, 2 years younger, and there were never 2 brothers closer than we were. And yet, when we were kids, there was never 2 boys that fought more than we did. My father had a hand about twice as big as mine, and I can remember when I got too hot, a big hand would grab me by the back of my neck. I do have this Spanish-American War flag of his, which I think is 12 stars or something. I should know that too, and his picture up there. Find something to point with. No. There he is. 1, 2. That one right over there from
Okay,
in the
and
back.
now that is?
That's that's William Lee Ford. And those were they're all dead now. Mm-hmm. This is his medal. I'll read what it says. And that's his flag. And I should know how many stars it is.
And that's from which war now?
Spanish-American War veterans, that's what they are.
Okay.
Yes. And he, at the last there, he was one of the remaining ones. I think I just read here a month or two ago about the last remaining of Spanish-American War veteran died. Can that possibly be? I think he was 110. That could be, because Grandpa Ford, oh, he was born about the same as my dad. He was born 1880. So if 1880 to now, is that possible that a man could be 110 years old?
Mm-hmm.
I think it was.
Okay, now flip it.
These top row is him rodeoing, and it'd all be in, I was born in 59. Well, 60s on up. This is him rodeoing. And this is him bulldogging, him bulldogging, him bulldogging, him. Then here's Mickey. Now Mickey bulldogging, Mickey bulldogging, Mickey. Louis Tercellus, I think, is hazing in some of these. Ken's hazing for him right there. And then comes along Mickey's boy, Brian, who just came home from Quebec here today. So here's Brian. Let's see which one's him. This one. So here's Brian, team roping. Brian, calf roping. Brian, bulldogging. This is a real good bulldogging picture. Brian. And then Brian's there on that calendar. There, his college, where he's going up to school, made a calendar, and that's some pictures. And this is his, who they're just now engaged. And this is Brian with his medals. And Brian was born in 82. Was put blind there in 1913, and he rode his Harley, I think it was a big Harley, or an Indian motorcycle down 11th, going east on 11th in there, because we lived between Chambers and Grant on 13th, and he'd ride it, and there'd be big ruts, and you'd get in one rut, and you had to drive it all the way in ruts. It was mud, in other words, and Willamette Street, of course, was just mud, and horse and buggies, of course. And my mother and father settled there, and they got married in 11. Was that it? They got married in 11. Yeah, and settled there in 11, and was building this house when he was put blind. He worked for the telephone company, lineman, and then on Saturdays he'd work in this livery station, which was on East 5th Street, a big old barn-like livery station, and where they'd shoe horses and stuff. But they were making a gear for the first train coming into Eugene and pouring this melted metal, and it exploded in his face and whatever, blinded him. And how they lived through that, I don't know. And he told about being in what was called Sisters Mary's Hospital, which is Sacred Heart now, and even up in Portland they had him up there. But they say his face, just like he had a permanent tan, but one eye was sewn closed and the other one was open, but it was all colors. It didn't have any. It was not good looking for that matter. But he was very skilled and did have those doll cradles and stuff that he built, and he finished building the house and stuff. And that's how I became his eyes, woodworking with him. Anyway, we grew up there on 13th. My brother, the one brother that's just 2 years older than me, who did live in Idaho, and he just passed away. And we didn't have a car, of course, because Dad was blind, and Mom couldn't. She became crippled up like the same stuff that I have, this osteoarthritis. And so we walked everywhere. And Dad would continue to repair the telephone lines out West 11th when he was stone blind, and I was his eyes. And we'd get our telephone free, and it was the old crank telephone on the wall. And he would go and repair the lines. He'd climb those poles, and I'd have to look up at him. And to this day, I can't stand to watch anybody up high. But he always told about coming down one time the pole, and he says, "How much farther is it?" And I says, "Oh, just one more step or something." And he took one step, and he told how it was 10 feet up, and he didn't have back trouble until after that, and so forth. And we had the cow and raised chickens and eggs and milk. I remember selling milk. I'd deliver milk in the morning for $0.05 a quart, and I would get a penny from that nickel. Can you imagine? My folks paid me a fifth of, $0.05 a quart you'd sell it for. And I have their old papers, which was amazing. The eggs and butter were quite expensive, not too far different from now. But of course, the milk, $0.05 a quart. And the house is still standing there. And I went to work at age 12 in the M&K market because of this, because not having skirts and sweaters like the other girls, and I kept hounding them up there. I guess it was actually, I turned 13 when I first started to work, and I worked in the ice cream counter up in front. And in fact, the old timers out here always remember me being in there. I was right in the window of the M&K market, which was on Chambers and 11th, which is now Ring of Fire. And it looks like a little building. That was the big supermarket of Eugene. And we were the only big supermarket, and we made our own ice cream and had an ice cream mixer in there. And I worked 50 cents an hour, which grown men were making 50 cents an hour at that time. And I'd work 7 days a week and 10 hours and more a day. But I supported myself, and that way I was able to, my folks were able to have meat and stuff. We never had really those luxuries. I met Ken there. His folks would shop there, and he kept asking me for a date, and but he had an airman's jacket or something on, leather jacket, and driving a motorcycle. And man, I thought he was way older than me, and he sure was cute. But I didn't want to say yes until finally then his folks were in with him. Whatever. We got married in 1948, just as I graduated from high school in 48. And we had an apartment in there for a few months when this place came up for sale. Well, we lived in there about a year because we had the first baby, and they held it back at the hospital because there were so many being born at the same time, and of course they said it was just an act of God, but it wasn't. It was not, but it was kind of a fate thing because I don't think we ever could have moved out here and batched in this, with a baby with us. And then Mickey was born 1951, and then Artie born 1953, and then Londa born 1959. End of story. Where Weimar is. And these airplanes had come down And they'd just practically clip the telephone posts out there. People would say, how can you stand all this noise? And we'd say, what noise? And I remember the big biplanes, coming down, and they'd land. That's where the airport was. That was Eugene Airport. And all that was field going clear up there. And then field all to the Amazon. Us kids used to play in the Amazon Creek, or whatever they call it now. And Lord help me, we'd catch these little perch out there and eat them, cook them. And wonder we never had a sick day in our lives. And we just had it, and it was all fields. And up where Fred Myers is now, that was Conger's donation land claim. The farmer was Conger's. And Woodmer's Lake, that was another one. There's a pond back in there behind Fred Myers, and I thought it was a great big pond because I remember catching a catfish in it, and it about pulled me in. We'd go fishing with a twig and a string and a safety pin on it, and you'd put a worm on it, and you'd catch these darn fish and pull them out. You never had a fishing pole. I remember catfish that have a stickery thorn thing, and I remember sticking my finger in it, swell up. Gigantic. I'll never forget that. Catfish. Went to school, graduated from school there in 48. Ken went to school out here at Crow, of course, with his sister. And Diane was my grade. She graduated the same year as I did in 48. Ken had graduated a year or two before. He'd skipped a grade. They tended to let you skip grades. He should have been graduating just a year before me. We were a year difference in age. We made that dam. I hauled 350 loads of hog fuel down there, and we made that. Ken and I did. I would back across that and dump these loads. We'd get a whole big farm truck that you'd go up to the International Paper and get underneath the chutes, and they'd fill that and they'd give it to us for nothing. And then they started charging us $1 or $2 a load, but that was just a pond down there. There was just a little pond, and we built this dam up, and then that pond, it dammed it up, and there we are with this giant dam down there. I wrote the words that are on these headstones up here in this Stephen Jenkins cemetery. Now look at all the buildings, and it's still moving out. That's why we keep paying the taxes on fields and stuff here that I don't use, so that we can keep people away from us. I don't know how many years we can keep doing this, but we lease it out to other people. We don't make money on it, so there's no income from it, but at least we can keep it going, and I hope the generations afterwards can do the same thing.